people haven't seen these kind of market crashes. Well, not the Great Depression, that's for sure, but they have seen market crashes, but they've also seen it come back every single time. And that's what's different. So yeah, we got through 1998, we got through the dot-com crash, we got through 2008, we got through 2020 and COVID. There's actually a good size market drawdown in 2018 between October 1st, 2018 and Christmas Eve, what I call the Christmas Eve massacre. Stock markets dropped 20% in under 3 months when the Fed kept raising interest rates, even though the economy was weakening. So they have seen those, but every single time it came back. Even in COVID, March, April 2020, the stock market went down 30%. It did. I mean, just almost straight down. But by September, we were back to new all-time highs. And so it's not that they've never seen that kind of volatility, but they learned the wrong lesson, which is it always comes back. And we know why, because the Fed bails you out. The Fed floods the zone with money. The Fed talks it up, et cetera. But the counter example, in 1929, when the stock market did crash, it was down 23% over 2 days. It was like a 12% day and an 11% day in late October 1929. But it kept going. The stock market crashed in October 1929, but it bottomed in June 1932. That was a 3-year moving crash or rolling crash, whatever you want to call it, with some rallies along the way. And the total damage was over 80%, not 30%, not 40%, down 80%. And what people don't know, many people don't know, is you said, okay, then it rallied in 1933 and 1934. The Fed messed up again and blundered again, as they usually do, in 1937 and threw us into a double dip. But if you ask people, okay, well, everyone knows the stock market crashed in 1929. When did it regain those highs? How long did that take? The answer is 25 years. It was 1954 before the market recovered from 1929. Now, it doesn't mean there weren't gains along the way or you couldn't make money. You could. But if you say, oh, I'll just sit tight and wait till it comes back, well, a lot of people didn't live long enough. They never saw their money back because they didn't live 25 more years. So that's a real bear market. It's happened before. And the point is, you need to be prepared for things like that. And no one alive, but very few people alive have seen anything like that. And if you say, well, what if we had another market crash right now? We'll talk about reasons why in a second. Why couldn't the Fed just come right back in and, print some more money and do the same thing over again and bail out the new failures, whoever they may be? You can just kind of keep bailing things out. Why not do it again? What's the big deal? Well, the answer is each bailout is bigger than the one before. And that's the point. You can go all the way back, 1994, Mexico, 1998, Russia, LTCM, 2000, dot-com, 2008, Lehman, 2020, pandemic. And they do bail out, but each one's bigger than the one before. I mean, we threw out $6 or $7 trillion of new debt on top of a $1 trillion a year baseline, $7 trillion in new debt to kind of dig our way out of 2020. So there's a limit. There comes a time when it's like, hey, this bailout is going to be 20 trillion, sorry, that check's too big. We're going to have to let some things fail. So what could happen? The first thing on my list is we're heading for a very severe recession. I just want to kind of explain briefly the dynamics of that. So the Fed's raising interest rates. We know that. They started, so it wasn't that long ago, but March 1st, 2022, the Fed policy rate was zero. It was 0%. People remember Paul Volcker. Oh, Paul Volcker raised interest rates to 20%. Well, he did, but so far Powell hasn't raised them as high. But he's raised them fast. I mean, even when Volcker was working his way to 20%, it took 3 years, from 1979 to 1982. And Jay Powell has done this in very rapid, very steep path. They started with baby steps, 25 basis points last March, and then 50 basis points following that, but then 4 hikes in a row, 75 basis points each. So Powell's plan is clear because he's told us 5 times. And he said the same thing all 5 times. He said inflation is job one. It's not that we don't care, but unemployment is going to go up. We're going to have a recession. He doesn't use the R word, by the way, but it's implicit in everything he says. We are going to have a recession. Unemployment is going up. And too bad. It's kind of too bad because we got to get inflation under control. And so the Fed is in search of something that they call the terminal rate. What's the terminal rate? The terminal rate is a rate that's high enough to bring inflation down on its own without further hikes. So it doesn't have to be higher than inflation. It has to be high enough to cause inflation to come down to the Fed's goal of 2% without hiking more. And when they get there to that terminal rate, they'll sit tight. They call it the pause. And the pause could be a year. And Powell said this. Again, this is right out of his script. So Powell's in search of the terminal rate. By the way, if you said to me, hey, Jim, what's the terminal rate? I would answer truthfully. I would say, I don't know, but neither does Jay Powell. Jay Powell doesn't know what the terminal rate is. He's kind of saying, we'll know it when we see it, but we're not there yet, and we're going to keep going. And they have what they call the dots, a silly name, but the members of the Board of Governors and the Federal Reserve Bank presidents give estimates, or their estimates of unemployment, inflation, growth, and interest rates for the next 3 years. And they put them as dots on a chart, so they call it the dots. And then, Wall Street gets the dots. They do a central tendency and regressions and all this stuff. One of the top Fed insiders, practically sits in Jay Powell's lap and has all the way back to Bernanke and Yellen, told me personally, he said, inside the Fed, they regard the dots as a joke. They're not better than guesses. Their forecasting ability is dismal. You or I would have better forecasts, and they wish they could get out of it, but they don't know how. So that's the truth. But the problem is, Wall Street and the financial media and the talking heads on CNBC, they want to talk about the dots, and it does affect market behavior. So even though it's a joke, even though the forecasts are terrible, you have to pay attention because it affects the markets. And if you're affecting the markets, and you're on the wrong side, you're going to get run over. So I look at the dots not because I put weight on them as predictive analytic tools, but because the market pays attention. So we have to pay attention. So the dots say that the terminal rate is going to be approximately 5.1%. They're not going to have a 0.1%. So 5.25 is your best guess as to what the Fed thinks the terminal rate is, because that's what they said in the dots. So you're going to see more rate hikes, 25 basis points each. That's going to get you to 5.25. At that point, they should say, okay, we're at the terminal rate. We'll sit tight and let inflation come down. So that's what Powell's going to do. But here's what the market says. The market says, hey, inflation's already coming down. And so the market says, hey, you did it. You're already there. Inflation's coming down. Why don't you stop? And by the way, you're going to get the message. The economy is going to be slowing down. Inflation is going to be coming down. You're going to hit the pause button early, and then you're going to cut rates. This is the famous pivot. Whenever you hear of the Fed pivot, that's when the Fed turns around and starts cutting rates instead of raising them. And that'll be just in time, and growth will slow, but it won't be too bad. And we'll come in for a soft landing. And this is the Goldilocks scenario. So again, typical Wall Street, get the pom-poms out. The Fed's going to cut rates, and so buy stocks. That's all Wall Street knows is buy stocks. Here's the reality. There is a chance that we are already at the terminal rate. But the conundrum is inflation coming down because the Fed is still hiking, or is the inflation coming down because they're at the terminal rate? Well, we don't know. It's kind of hard to sort those things out. Powell would say, yeah, it's coming down. I know that, of course, but it's because I'm hiking and I'm going to keep doing it. My view is, no, you actually did it. It's mission accomplished. You just don't know it. That means, as usual, they're going to screw it up. They're going to blunder. They're going to go too far. And it's not going to be a mild recession. It's not going to be Goldilocks. In this version, Goldilocks gets eaten by the bears. In other words, you're going to throw this economy into a very deep recession because you're going to go too far, as usual. And you're not going to know it until too late. By the time you realize it's mission accomplished, you will have gone too far, too long, rates are going to be too high, and it's not going to be a soft landing. If Wall Street's talking up the stock market based on the soft landing Goldilocks scenario, but Powell's going to stick to his guns and raise rates too high, that's going to cause stocks to crash very severely, very suddenly. If the market were adjusting, say, yeah, Powell means it, it's going to keep, we ought to come down a little bit, that would be one thing, but that's not what's happening. The market's trying to rally. Powell's warning people what's going to happen. They're not listening, and it is going to happen. So markets will crash.